HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Invisible Machine, the startling truth about trauma and the scientific breakthrough that can transform your life. By Eugene Lipov, M.D., and Jamie Mustard. Read by Kent Klineman. Publisher's note: this book is for informational purposes only. It is not intended to serve as a substitute for professional medical advice. The author and publisher specifically disclaim any and all liability arising directly or indirectly from the use of any information contained in this book. A healthcare professional should be consulted regarding your specific medical situation. Any product mentioned in this book does not imply endorsement of that product by the author or publisher. Forward. Post-traumatic stress, PTS, is a natural, normal, temporary response to a sudden, dehumanizing event. We humans are humane because we suffer and empathize with the suffering of others. Post-traumatic stress helps our species survive. My generation recognized post-traumatic stress as morally and medically normal, yet defined post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, as a mental illness. We modified that definition over the decades as our science and our understanding evolved. In 1980, we failed to realize that the term disorder was both stigmatizing and inaccurate. When a survivor of severe trauma and traumatic stress cannot recover within a month, that person deserves the accuracy and the dignity of the term post-traumatic stress injury. This injury is physical. The results are medical as well as emotional. Like how scalding heat harms our skin, a searing event changes our neuroanatomy and our neurophysiology. 50 years ago, we could not detect these changes through routine neuroimaging. Now we can. These visible changes affect our thoughts, actions, and reactions. Post-traumatic stress symptoms are a natural, biological response built into our DNA as a survival mechanism, one that can be turned on, but not always turned off. This is one of the major reasons I want to see the term PTSD changed to PTSI. It's a physical injury, not a disorder. That means post-traumatic stress injuries can be healed, the same as burns and broken bones. The wound is just hidden within our nervous system and brain. PTSI is a biological imperative that must be critically examined by every sector of our society. It is like a weed with a deep root system we can't seem to eliminate. Could it be possible that preventable forms of crime, mental illness, discrimination, child abuse, mass shootings, homelessness, and disease have proliferated because of post-traumatic stress injury? All these years I have asked, how can we preserve human nature and reduce human cruelty? One compelling answer to that question is in this book, The Invisible Machine, with the latest research and groundbreaking science from colleagues who have advanced the treatment of post-traumatic stress injury. There is hope. Frank Ochberg, world-renowned trauma specialist who defined the term Stockholm Syndrome, and who, along with Dr. Jonathan Shea, coined the term post-traumatic stress injury. Introduction. Joe stepped through the door onto his front stoop, took a sip of coffee from his favorite travel mug, and tilted his face toward the morning sun. A loud blast from the neighbor's car horn disrupted the peace. Joe's body twitched hard, and his heart leaped into a fast beat. His cheeks flushed. Swiping at coffee on his jacket, he loudly cursed the neighbor. After his cathartic outburst, Joe should have settled down within seconds, been able to shake it off. Instead, the curse words continued to flow as he punted a small toy off the sidewalk and stalked to his car, wrenching the door open. Have you ever overreacted this way? Probably yes. We all have our moments when we let little things get to us. However, some of us respond this way multiple times a day, every day, with over-the-top reactions at inappropriate times. Do you know why? It's because you're human, and you've experienced trauma. Despite what you have heard in the movies, post-traumatic stress injury, a biological phenomenon commonly and wrongfully referred to as post-traumatic stress disorder, isn't just for those who have survived a war or brutal abuse. Every level of trauma causes stress to the body to some degree, no matter whether you are a grocery store clerk or a combat medic. Discussed in detail in this book, you'll hear about how the sympathetic nervous system, dubbed the invisible machine by the authors, can be triggered into a consistent state of overactivation by big trauma, but also by lesser amounts of stress occurring over a long period. And this overactivation, though invisible to the naked eye, can now be captured by scans. The scans reveal what an overactive sympathetic nervous system does to the part of the brain called the amygdala, creating a feedback loop that keeps the fight or flight mode activated even when danger is long gone. This permanent state of fight or flight leads to post-traumatic stress and symptoms revolving around anxiety, insomnia, nightmares, sense of doom, hair trigger responses, paranoia, anger, and hypervigilance. Anybody can acquire trauma that leads to PTSI, and now a reset exists that can take away the misery. The goal of this book is to provide authentic, observable change in how we take on post-traumatic stress as a society. The authors offer a contemporary understanding of post-traumatic stress injury and how many, many more people suffer from post-traumatic stress than is generally acknowledged. How a quick, accessible biological intervention exists and has been proven safe and far more effective than other healing modalities, and how the proliferation of post-traumatic stress unnecessarily impacts society as a whole. You may be asking yourself, who are we to tell you what to think? Well, first of all, I am simply a recorder, collaborator, and word honer. I was asked to join the team because of my experience writing about PTSI and criminal justice. I worked with the Invisible Machine team to help capture and refine the research, the interactions, and the genius, intuitive leaps that the authors have shared with me. On the other hand, author Eugene Lipov, MD, a board-certified physician in anesthesiology and pain, is one of the world's leading experts on the physical consequences of post-traumatic stress. Based out of Chicago, he is the chief medical officer of an ever-growing number of Stella centers, clinics that offer his innovative treatment for PTSI. Eugene pioneered a simple, safe procedure based on a century-old pain anesthetic procedure that successfully treats trauma. Years of clinical documentation on thousands of patients demonstrate an efficacy rate upward of 85% or more, with minimal side effects. His treatment is touted by his most prestigious peers, including Dr. Frank Ochberg, Dr. Daniel Amen, Dr. Jay Faber, and Dr. Stephen Porges. Multiple peer-reviewed studies have verified the safety and efficacy of the treatment. NYU is currently conducting a $3.8 million research study based on Eugene's procedure. This procedure was endorsed by Barack Obama, and it has been featured in many major media outlets, including 60 Minutes, CBS This Morning, and The Joe Rogan Experience. Author Jamie Mustard is an artist, a strategic multimedia consultant, product futurist, and thought leader. A graduate of the London School of Economics, he is best known for his work with high-profile companies to make their ideas or products stand out, and for his book, The Iconist, 2019 Outstanding Works of Literature Award winner, based on his economics of attention principle. As a child, he suffered years of sustained high and low-level trauma, and it was only after stumbling across Dr. Eugene Lipov and his procedure that he found relief from PTSI. Since that day, Jamie has brought together a wide array of people to help promote Eugene and his life-changing innovation, from special forces operators and earthquake survivors to the incarcerated, to famous doctors, to everyday people suffering from the effects of trauma. How the universe placed each influential individual in Jamie's path is fascinating and seems a minor miracle. With so many PTSD/PTSI books on the market, you may be asking, what makes this one noteworthy? It's because we talk about the largely undiscussed underlying issues around trauma and offer an actionable solution without dependency. The Invisible Machine also addresses the medical industry that has been slow to take notice and provides an in-depth analysis which includes confronting the critics' arguments of Eugene's procedure. When the threat of post-traumatic stress to individuals goes unacknowledged, the impact of the symptoms is harmful and far-reaching. The many studies and decades of clinical data conclusively reveal long-term mental and physical issues caused by post-traumatic stress. Years of doctor visits and prescriptions tie up the nation's healthcare system and have done little to stem the tide of harmful symptoms for most people. Then there are the statistics on PTSI-based suicide, which are devastating. These individual struggles have broader implications for society as a whole, the society you live in. While the authors assess the similarities between all cases of PTSI, no matter how or where it is acquired, there is also a focus on the parallel nature of post-traumatic stress in combat soldiers and in criminals, and how both respond when their nervous systems are reset and the symptoms are reversed. Reintegration into family and community is an issue for returning combat soldiers and those just released from prison. The culture shock is a lot easier to maneuver if the person isn't dealing with PTSI symptoms and can remain grounded and able to fully function. Imagine a world where recidivism rates drop, or even being able to stop criminal behavior before it advances. A world where our soldiers can return home and feel at peace and restore healthy relationships. a world where people who've experienced years of abuse or those who have gone through a long, slow drip of micro-traumatic experiences can shut down all the symptoms of PTSI and move on with healing emotionally. What if that world isn't as far off as it seems? What if Eugene's procedure can get us there, as it has for the many voices in this book? With less pain in the world, we could see less stress in everyday households, leading to healthier, physically and emotionally, children and adults, to happier and healthier work environments, less crime. If that sounds too good to be true, have no fear. This book is realistic and data-driven. We are not dreamy idealists selling a miracle cure. We don't think the procedure you will learn about will cure humans of being human. Frankly, we don't use the term cure at all. It is a reset. Taking on the truth. Real tangible relief now exists with a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress. Eugene's procedure is biological, it is safe, it is accessible, and it has a clinical success rate and longevity that far outstrips other treatments. This is because many approaches take on the external symptoms of PTSI, while Eugene's biological innovation treats the root of the physical problem, the overactivation of the sympathetic nervous system, or what he calls the overactivation of the invisible machine. The procedure, now called the Dual Sympathetic Reset, DSR, is a highly innovative version of a century-old nerve block called the stellate ganglion block, SGB. DSR is simple: a double injection of an ordinary local anesthetic on the right side of the neck at the C3/C6 vertebrae, which is then repeated on the left side if necessary. I believe this might just be the most impactful medical innovation since the advent of penicillin in 1928, and I intend to prove it, says Jamie. This will change the way humans move through the world. As a human step, I compare it to the moon landing in 1969. A random conversation set this medical innovator and artist on a scientific, humanity-oriented journey to bring the procedure to the people. Along the way, the universe pulled a handful of exceptional strangers into the quest, forging a small band of strong-willed characters who have joined the good fight, making sure change happens for individuals and around the globe. This group of intense strangers, Jamie's creative partner likes to call them the Avengers, has come together to support Eugene's work becoming a new normal for PTSI treatment. Some influencers you will meet in this book: a war correspondent, a female sheriff presiding over one of the largest jails in the United States, and several Special Forces officers. They all want to stop unnecessary suffering in others. The interviews used in The Invisible Machine were conducted by Jamie and his team, while the medical knowledge and data collection comes from Eugene. Jamie and Eugene shaped this content, provided and explained research findings, and offered hundreds of patient anecdotal evidence, stories, interviews, and articles. This is wholly their book. The honor has been all mine. Holly Lawrence, collaborative writer. Note: while referencing post-traumatic stress symptoms, the more accurate term PTSI is used most of the time. However, the more common term PTSD is used when it is part of a quote or summary from source material, or if it fits that particular content's timeline. Chapter 1. The Tiger and You. In an upscale restaurant in downtown Chicago, the windows were thrown open to the damp night due to COVID-19. Artist Jamie Mustard listened to Dr. Eugene Lipov explore the topic of trauma over platters of stuffed chiles and beef birria tacos. In his light Ukrainian accent, Eugene asked Jamie, "If you were a caveman, forced to run from a tiger all the time, what would that do to you?" "I'm guessing nothing good," Jamie answered. If anyone was going to know about the consequences of large or long-term doses of stress, it was the premier pain physician and board-certified anesthesiologist across from him. "That is true," Eugene said. 30,000 years ago, we were surrounded by constant threats and had to stay alert or die, which obviously is traumatic. That hyper-alert response to stress or danger is biological. It is a physical reaction built into the DNA that can make us miserable in the long run, but keeps us alive. The doctor talked about how the reality of a large, aggressive animal bursting into a caveman's shelter was a genuine, imminent, and persistent threat. That caveman had little to rely on to keep himself alive except his ability to respond quickly, to remain in what is popularly referred to as fight or flight mode. Pausing briefly to order a bottle of wine, the doctor continued, "If you didn't want to die, you'd need to have a hair-trigger response, be ready to fight at any moment. You wouldn't sleep because, there's a tiger hanging around. Have to stay alert, be at the ready. This is hypervigilance. You're going to have a hair-trigger response to any stimuli. You're going to have extreme paranoia and anxiety, knowing that a big cat is likely around the corner, licking his chops. And you'd be contemplating your death all the time, homicidal or suicidal ideation. Thanks to fearing that tiger's attack day in and day out, you'll eventually just want it to be over with." Eugene took a sip of his wine, then said, "And you're going to have deep erectile dysfunction, because if you are running from a tiger, you're not able to have sex." Jamie grimaced, then chuckled. A thought leader, according to Forbes, he was not easy to impress, and yet he found himself sucked into Eugene's storytelling. The doctor had a way of talking that was educational while entertaining, reminding Jamie of his favorite professors at London School of Economics. A leader in the emerging field of psychoanesthesia, Eugene was the chief medical officer at the Stella Center, known for his use of complex anesthetics during heart transplants or other complex trauma surgeries, and for successfully treating nerve pain, innovations in the treatment of hot flashes, and now pioneering a physical relief to post-traumatic stress symptoms. The symptoms that had haunted the overly vigilant, stressed-out caveman were the same kind of issues that had brought Jamie to Dr. Lipov's clinic earlier that day. Millions and millions of people around the world may be dealing with long-term trauma fallout, Eugene told Jamie, whether they recognize it in themselves or not. But as you've discovered, I found a way to help them. Leaving dinner that night, Jamie found that Eugene's statement impacted him deeply. It would drive his thoughts for months. It became a call to action. What has trauma done to you? The two people described next seem to have nothing in common, but they do. They both have endured trauma. They both suffer from post-traumatic stress. A business owner, young and physically fit, loses consciousness. From afar, he hears the ER doctor say, "He's crashing, code blue." When he wakes, he is told his heart stopped briefly. Why? He's shocked to find he's suffered a severe panic attack. An Army reservist wakes from a heavy sleep to hear his wife grunting. She is beating at his chest. He has his hands wrapped around her neck choking her so hard that she is being lifted up from the bed. This is the third time he has awakened to find he is trying to kill the woman he loves. Frontline workers, abuse survivors, and disaster victims dealing with post-traumatic stress are discussed widely in today's medical journals, as well as in mainstream movies and television shows. No one finds it surprising any longer that extreme trauma can lead to post-traumatic stress symptoms. However, what is not discussed is how many everyday people live with those same symptoms, and how often those everyday people do not recognize post-traumatic stress symptoms in themselves. According to the National Council of Mental Well-Being, 70% of adults have experienced at least one impactful traumatic event in their lifetime in the United States. That's 223.4 million people. That's 28 out of the 40 people living on your street. The CDC states that 20% of people who experience a traumatic event will develop what has commonly been labeled PTSD, which means some of your neighbors are currently dealing with symptoms like hypervigilance, erratic anger, insomnia, as well as various health conditions like heart disease. Or maybe it's you. We propose that the number of those suffering from post-traumatic stress is actually closer to 30%, possibly up to 60%. At this point in history, these numbers are swiftly trending upward, thanks to COVID, social upheaval, and now a large-scale war in Europe. As it is, trauma experiences and their consequential health symptoms are vastly underreported, if acknowledged at all. And why is that? When you hear the term PTSD, your brain likely conjures up a scene from a popular movie with a man in fatigues suffering a breakdown. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a widely recognized diagnosis and accepted health issue for combat soldiers, as the military has a population that experiences obvious trauma. Furthermore, soldiers with trauma symptoms are easier to track and treat. They are part of a highly regimented organization with vast records. The military also has the means to research and fight post-traumatic stress symptoms and has found some success, including using Eugene's innovation on a large scale. The problem is that the focus has been solely on the military community for so long. A PTSD diagnosis has become linked with extreme trauma, even heroism, in the minds of the populace. And that is far, far from the truth. Everyday individuals are suffering with no clue as to why, and it is causing a public health crisis within the healthcare system and the criminal justice system. It is public knowledge that being involved in big traumatic events like 9/11 can lead to post-traumatic stress. But in order to understand how so many of us can acquire post-traumatic stress symptoms without realizing it, the full definition of trauma must be better broadcast. We will be delving into trauma more thoroughly throughout the book, but know for now that the average person with unrecognized trauma often has dealt with microdoses of stress over a long period. For example, growing up with food insecurity or with neglectful parents. That stress can build up and reach a point at which the person develops the same post-traumatic stress symptoms as a Navy SEAL, an assault victim, or a 9/11 survivor. The truth is, trauma, no matter how it is inflicted and no matter how big or small we perceive the trauma to be, can create a cascade of biological changes that produce an overactive sympathetic nervous system. This forces the brain's amygdala, the part of the brain that in large part controls the stress response, to switch on, the fight or flight response, and keep it on, creating a feedback loop, even when the danger or stress.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?